I ended up reading 11 books in July, and they're a mix of romance, fantasy, romantasy, a classic book that's actually banned, sci-fi, and thrillers. There's a lot of different genres that I read last month, so let's talk about all of these. And if you can't stop watching these read-in wrap-up videos, go ahead and subscribe because I've watched so many of them that I'm actually late recording this video because I was too excited watching all the other videos that people have done for this. So in no particular order, we are going to start with Bunny by Mona Awad. Or is it like Awad? I truly do not know how to pronounce that name. Please let me know if you know how to pronounce that name. And this was a really interesting book. My friend recommended it to me and I devoured it in less than 24 hours. And what was really great about it is that it's a psychological horror, unreliable narrator, cult vibes, dark academia setting with modern day, but in a cool like way that it's, I don't know how to really explain it because I'm honestly not a fan of modern day. For me, books are a great escape from the world. So I'm like, why would I want to hear about characters paying rent and playing on their phones and stuff? Makes me sound like a boomer, to be honest. But this one was done in a good way where it wasn't all about the modern day setting. It was more about like the psychological thought process of our main character, Samantha. And so Samantha, unlike everybody at that school, she has won a scholarship, which is the only reason why she's able to afford a prestigious writing school like that. And a lot of the people in that school are, well, a bit snooty. And so what this book does very well is it really puts you inside of the head of Samantha as somebody who just doesn't fit in, somebody who feels very lonely and only has her one friend who doesn't even go to that school. And so when Samantha is basically invited to be kind of part of the Bunnies group, which is kind of like this group of girls who are in the same class as her, but they're all like obsessed with each other. They call each other Bunny, and there's something a little bit weird about them, but Samantha wants to belong somewhere, and so she ends up going to hang out with them, and you basically follow her slow descent into madness, and you don't actually know if what you're reading is real or not, and there's a lot of different ways that you can take this book. I personally really loved it. Some people don't like it because it may come across as it's trying to be really smart, but for me, I just loved that I had no idea what was going on until the end. And there's so many ways that you can interpret this book and what actually happened that for me, it was a really good read. I ended up giving it 4.5 stars. Really had a great time with that. Next up, we have The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood. This is, of course, a classic book written in the early 80s, I believe. And you may have known it as a TV show or something you read in high school or even as a movie. But what you might not know is this book has actually been banned in a bunch of different places throughout the world. Here's where it is banned. And so for me, I want to read the banned books. I want to know what people don't want us to be reading, you know? And this book is a very interesting way that it's been done because it is a dystopian story. You're following along our main character, Offred, and obviously that's not her real name, but that's the name she's been given because it's like she's an offering to Fred, and like all the names are like that. And this is a world where women are basically forced to just carry babies and birth them because there's a super low birth rate in this country that it takes place in. I think it is in America somewhere, despite this being a Canadian author book. And so you're following somebody who had actually had experience in kind of like a modern day world, well, like a modern day 80s world, and then how she's constantly thinking back to the time before and her time now as a handmaiden whose whole purpose is to basically birth children, and if you don't do that, then yeah, it's not a good life. And so when you're following along Offred, what I really like is that not only is this written in like a diary format, think Diary of a Young Girl, but it's also just like a regular person. She is not a rebellion like leader. She's not someone who's out there to break the rules and change the status quo. She's not a villain. She's just like you and me. And this is just her experience. And it's so well done. I had a good time reading this book. I don't think it's like the most entertaining book. Like, I find that a lot of the classics are like that, where they're not really entertaining, but they're very interesting. And what makes this one really good as a classic, especially if you haven't read classics for fun, this is a good one to start with because it's so easy to read, because it is definitely more modern, whereas if you go to like Dracula or Count of Monte Cristo, you're like, I don't understand this old English, because honestly, I feel that. So yeah, as terms of classics goes, definitely a good one. It has very interesting themes about women, what a world could look like if women don't have control of their own bodies and their own decisions, if they're forced to basically be treated as animals are treated, have no rights, all of that stuff. Good read. I think I gave it 3.5 stars because it's an important read, but it's not gonna be the most entertaining thing you ever read, you know? Next up, we have a romance book called P.S. I Hate You by Laura Connolly. And this book was honestly one I still think about. I think I ended up giving it 3.5 stars, but I feel like I might want to bump the rating up a little bit, to be honest, to like a low 4 stars, if that makes sense. Because what this book does really well is the way that the characters handle grief. It follows along 2 characters, although it's promoted as exes, they're not really exes. They like kind of like kissed each other once and then like stopped talking to each other. But it's the brother's best friend and the sister. And the brother unfortunately passes away and kind of leaves a bit of a puzzle for these 2 to figure out. And so this book literally spans a couple of years where the sister and the best friend have to go to these different locations to spread the brother's ashes in order to read one of the letters that he left for them. And they have to do it together, even though she really, really hates him because she feels like he just kind of didn't see her the way that she wanted to be seen, like she's just the little sister, and that he had only kind of kissed her that one time as like a thank you for something that she did by helping take care of like his family and stuff in the summertime. So yeah, she's got bad blood going on, and the guy is just like, he's just a bit hard to communicate with because he's kind of those like, you know, those tall, broody guys with the dark hair. That's this guy, which honestly I am a sucker for. It's embarrassing how much of a sucker I am for that. It's so easy to just make me go, ah! But yeah, this book does a really good job, especially with the slow burn that you get from these friends. I would call them friends to lovers, to be honest, because like they weren't really enemies. I feel like enemies to lovers, that phrase, that trope is often misused because like when you think enemies, like literal enemies, give me enemies, people who are trying to kill each other because they hate each other and they don't have any good thing to think about that person. They're not enemies. They're just people who were friends and then had some bad miscommunication and then, you know, all that stuff. But this was a fun book. It does a really great job in representing grief, and the slow burn is honestly really, really fun. So yeah, low 4 stars. Next up, we have a romance book as well, and this is a country romance. This is Heartless by Elsie Silver, and this is the 2nd book in the Chestnut Springs series. This was actually recommended to me by one of my subscribers, and I ate this book up. It was such a vibe. You have a age gap romance between our 2 leads, and the guy basically is trying to hire a nanny because he needs to take care of his ranch and needs somebody to basically make sure his kid is okay. And he has like a fairly young kid. I believe he has like 6 or so. So around the age where like they're starting to get a bit more independent, but like not really. They still need somebody to watch them because his nanny is retiring. And so one of the characters from the first book, Summer, ends up recommending her friend Willa to be the nanny. And so you have this, she's not like younger, like don't worry, she's not like a teenager. She's like early 20s, early 30s maybe. It's hard to remember her exact age, but it wasn't like a huge age gap. It was like maybe 10-15 years, which I really enjoy. And so she's the live-in nanny, and so she really bonds really well with the boy. It's practically like her own son, which she doesn't have a son, by the way. And she's just constantly there when the guy is there because like they kind of live in the same house. It has a really cute scene where she gets sick and he takes care of her, and it's really cute. And the spicy scenes in this book are not your stock standard spicy scenes. You get some really interesting stuff, some outside stuff, some interesting stuff, if you know what I mean. If you like spicy stuff and you're tired of the stock standard, like this book. I just had a great time with it. I think I gave it 4.5 stars. I'm not the biggest fan of a country romance, but there's just something special about this one where you have that kind of dynamic and you still have like that country small town setting and like the hot cowboy guy, and it's like, it was really good. And you literally have a grown woman like punt this kid, like some other kid, into a swimming pool because he's being a jerk. And honestly, I really like it. I really like it too because this is like the type of fiery woman lead that I think a lot of books misunderstand when we say we want like a fiery woman lead. They think that just means they just want to beat people up all the time. No, Willa is a really good fiery woman lead. Okay, let's talk about the thriller book that I read. You Belong Here by Megan Miranda. Now, this is one of my favorite covers I think I have seen in a very long time for a book. Look at her. Beautiful, and like the subtle like you don't belong here. This is genius. Whoever did this cover deserves a raise because this is such a good cover, and like the way that the colors pop out, and like you want to pick up this book. You want to pick this up because of just how beautiful of a cover it is. However, for me, this book, the cover was the best part about it. And now I don't mean like I hated this book. I certainly did not hate this book. I think I gave it a low 3 stars. But I think that there was a lot of stuff that was missing with this book. Perhaps it needed to be worked on a little bit longer. But the writing itself was really, really good. So the writing was good, but for me, it was the way that the story played out where it just felt like there were a lot of loose ends that weren't really cleared up. And I don't know if that was intentional, but it just felt like for me as a reader that I was like, oh, wait, what? Like this doesn't end in a way that's like satisfactory in my opinion. And there's just like some really useless characters who, I get the idea when you're reading a thriller book, you want to kind of like confuse the reader because you don't know like who's responsible for this, who's responsible for that. Everybody is a potential bad guy. And so I understand that part, but there's just like some characters who I don't understand why they're even in the book, to be honest. But that's my opinion on it. So let me tell you about the book in case you do want to add it to your TBR. So this follows a mother, and it kind of has 2 timelines in a way. And so a very long time ago, when this mother was in college, her best friend in college ended up, they're not entirely sure if it was intentional, but she may have intentionally burned a few guys alive by trapping them in the tunnel. And our main character, by association, people think helped her best friend escape because after this happened, the best friend disappeared and was never seen from again. And they're like, suspicious. We think that you basically, helped your friend escape because you're such a great friend. And so she ends up basically getting kicked out of her school and ends up finishing her degree, completely different country. And so she obviously doesn't want to go back there because like people talk and she doesn't want to have to deal with that. So she obviously doesn't go back there and she raises her daughter in a completely different town. But then her daughter ends up getting accepted to that very same school that the mother was trying to run away from. And so mother's obviously very upset about this. And so she ends up driving her kid up there, drops her off and sees a couple of familiar faces and is like, this is kind of awkward. And then eventually she leaves. But then she gets a phone call from her daughter and the call drops and her mother instincts like kick in and she immediately goes to figure out like what happened to my daughter. Her daughter's missing. Nobody can find her. They don't know what happened. And so you're following just the span of a couple of days as this mother is literally like freaking out because she knows deep inside that something has happened to her daughter and nobody believes her and she needs to figure it out on her own. Now, I really like the premise of this book. I think where it fell flat though was the 2 different timelines where you have the mother in college and then like the mother in present day, because even though the writing is super, super good, when you start to get a little bit more towards the end, this isn't a very big book, it starts to fall apart from the way that I kind of found the book, like certain events that happened. I would have liked if it stayed a bit more focused on its initial kind of idea and gave us a bit more of the mother-daughter relationship that it was building up for. But yeah, other than that, it's not like the worst thing you'll ever read. It's not the best thing you'll ever read. It's an okay read. So if you want an okay thriller book that you can read like fairly quickly, like you can add it. It's just won't blow your mind. Oh, I'm so excited to tell you about this next book. This is a sci-fi book actually. And it's Annibot by Sierra Greer. I really, really, really liked this book. I have definitely in my head increased it to a 5-star. When I first reviewed this book, I give it a 4.5. I cannot stop thinking about this book. I literally was at the bookstore the other day with my brother's girlfriend and convinced her to buy this book because it is so good and such a fast-paced read. Like literally, if you're even like a reading slump, this is the kind of book that will really help get you out of it. So let me tell you about it because I love this book. You follow our main character, Annie, and she is a robot with artificial intelligence. And so when her artificial intelligence settings are basically turned on, she starts to learn about the world around her a little bit better. she's been created to be the girlfriend of this guy, Doug. And Doug is your typical narcissistic, gaslighting jerk of a boyfriend. And so because she's been programmed to love him, she starts to get very conflicting feelings, because the more she learns about the world, the more she learns about relationships and Doug and what she should be doing, she's constantly being belittled and gaslit throughout the entire book, and you see it get worse and worse and worse, and she's like, what's going on? Like, I love this guy, but like, he's making me feel like really empty inside, and I don't understand. Like, I'm supposed to love him, he's supposed to love me. And so she's dealing with this very complex, very human experience throughout the entire book. And it's also interesting because obviously she's a robot, and so the way that people treat her is they don't treat her as a human, but the more you read about her from her experience, you really start to see her as a human being with emotions, and she gets stressed and depressed and panicky and like all of this. And I think that this book is honestly one of those books that does the best job in depicting an emotionally abusive relationship. Because in this book, there's no physical abuse, it's all emotional. And I think that that's so important because it's often like misunderstood. That's like, and like Annie feels so shamed constantly, and she doesn't want to tell people about it. She doesn't even really have friends. Like, Doug controls every single aspect of her life, and you see how that affects her, and it is so good. Honestly, one of the best reads, I think, of the year. It is honestly hands down such a good book. If that's the kind of story that you like to read, I think you will really like this book. It is sci-fi, it is very short, and it's just so human and it's so emotional, and I absolutely ate it up. It's so good. If you are to read any of the books in this list, pick this one. The next book that I'm going to show you is a romantasy with one of the most beautiful settings. Bury Our Bones in the Midnight Soil by V.E. Schwab. This is the book that is basically described as toxic lesbian vampires, which is such a good selling point to me. Like, yeah. And so this is a very character-driven story, and this is where this book's a bit conflicting, because there's people who seem to really enjoy it like I did, or there's people who were disappointed in it because there's not as much plot in this book. This book is very, very character-driven. You are following along 3 different women in 3 different timelines who become vampires. And so you get to see the 1500s, the 1800s, and the, like, 2019, like before COVID time. And you see the differences, and you follow along some characters for a very, very long time, because all the timelines eventually, like, meet up, and so you get to go through all these different timelines to see and just like learn about these characters and their experiences and what it was like to be not only a woman, but to be a gay woman in the 1500s and the 1800s especially. In the writing of this book, I will say it took a while to get into it because it is very lyrical, it is very pretty, but it paints the scene for the kind of gothic vibe you're going to get. And the way that the vampires are depicted in this book is very different, but in a good way. Because it shows that these vampires, they're hungry for more. They're not just hungry for blood. That's like a driving factor, but when you have like so many lifetimes, you're always wanting the next best thing. And all 3 of these women chase it in different ways. And it is so, so, so good. But only if you like character-driven stories. If you do not prefer character-driven stories, I do not think you will like this book, because that's literally the plot, just following 3 women for a very, very long time. And there's a lot of vampire lore. There's kind of like mentions of stuff that was like vampire lore, but maybe it wasn't actually true in terms of like what these vampires are. And it's really cool, especially as it relates to like what the Midnight Soil is. And I just thought it was a really fun and different take on vampires, and it was really good. I love vampires, so yeah, if you like vampires and character-driven stories and you want some more LGBTQ plus kind of stories, I really did like this one. Another book that I read was actually because I wanted to reread the book that got me into reading. And that just happened to be Animorphs by K.A. Applegate, and this is the first book, The Invasion. This is the book that got me into reading, and it's basically about a bunch of teenagers who happen to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, and they encounter an alien who gives them the ability to morph. And morphin, basically, they can touch an animal and absorb kind of its like DNA pattern, and they can turn into it. And that means they're also kind of now fighting a war that they didn't even know was going on between these aliens called Yeerks. And honestly, for a kid's book, these monsters, like these aliens, are, it's really, really dark because they basically just possess people. They go in through their ear and control everything about them, and because they need a host, because otherwise they're like these gray sluggy things. And you see just how tortured the people who, because like the Yeerks have to come out of their ears and like kind of swim around for a little bit before going back in, otherwise they dry out. And you see how tortured the people are who are basically being held in cages until they're a host again. Yeah, so this book honestly is really dark. This entire series is incredibly dark, especially the way it ends, and just like the fact that this is a book for like younger children. I love that. I personally am not a fan of making things too kiddie for kids, because kids can handle a lot more than you think they can, and I honestly think they'll be more mature if they read books that aren't just like, oh, the bunny goes and jumps up the street and then the bunny is friends with the other bunny. Like, that's good when you're like a toddler, but when you're like 8, this is a deeper story, and I think that that's an important thing to have. So yeah, I didn't really give it a rating, but in terms of like the nostalgia of it, it still slaps. Still a good series. Maybe one day I'll reread the entire thing again, but there's like 53 books or something, so we'll see. But yeah, honestly, still slaps, still good. If you perhaps have a younger kid between like, I don't know, 8 to even like 12 years old, I think that they would like this book, and I think that it's a really great series, and it still holds up even after like over 20 years. And last but certainly not least, we're putting all these 3 books together because they are part of the same series. If you have been watching a lot of my July videos, you will already know, because these are my obsession. The Boys of Tommen. Book 4, Book 5, and Book 6. I love these books. These books are so good. I'm in a whole video about talking about every single one of the Boys in Tommen books in depth with spoilers, so if you want a bit more into that, that video is definitely over here for you to check out. But yeah, this series is incredible, and it's one of those series that it is very character driven, and the mental health aspects of these books are so well handled and so realistic that they are really hard to read sometimes, especially Release in 10. This was the hardest book to read, not because it wasn't good. This book was incredible, but because it is the heaviest and saddest and darkest of the Boys of Tommen series, and I loved every second of it. This one here is the conclusion to, well, not really conclusion, but for now, conclusion of Joey and Aoife's story. And so this kind of gives you the timeline of what happened during Keeping 13, and so I don't want to give you too many spoilers in case you haven't read the series yet, but yeah, this is the conclusion to that story, so like the timelines are eventually all going to match up. This one is Gibbsy and Claire's story, so they are kind of like some of the side characters who are very funny, and you get a really good in-depth into a character who doesn't really have trauma, and then a character who uses humor to mask a ton of trauma that you don't even know until this book. It's incredible. I have chills still thinking about this book. I constantly think about this one. It made me sick to my stomach, some of the stuff that happens to this poor man. And then of course, Release in 10, this is Hugh and Lizzie's story, who are also some other side characters. And this, I love the romance in this book so much. You get so much good backstory. It's a completely backstory book. And then there's going to be another one that comes out that I believe is going to match up to the timelines of this book, because this book has the most recent timelines. There's like a whole thing about like each of the books. You get like the past, and then you get some timelines, and then I believe that they're all working up to the timelines for this book. And then more books are going to come out about the first 2 characters, Johnny and Shannon, and then it's going to repeat until everybody has all their stories, and hopefully all their happily ever afters. But I love the series so much that like I really hope it never ends, because they are so well written. All the characters are so complex and beautiful, and it's just so realistic and awesome, and I love it, and I'm never tired of reading these books. And I think that they could literally go on until the characters are like elders, and then maybe stories like knockoff stories about like their kids, and just keep the whole thing going, because it is so good. It's one of my favorite series of the year. And those are all 11 books that I read in the month of July. It was really cool being able to diversify my genres, because that's something that I've wanted to do a little bit more. So Bunny technically is like a horror, so I guess we count horror in that as well, but usually I'm just like a romance fantasy kind of girl, but I really wanted to expand it, and so I'm really happy with the overall reads that I had, I didn't have anything that I DNF'd, which is great. I'm not very good at DNF in any way. And the only books that I really struggled with was like Release in 10 because of just how dark and like, you know, depressing that it was. But like, it's good. It's a really, really good book, but just some of the stuff that that book covers is just really hard to read. So I actually read Animorphs in between reading that book to kind of like cleanse and not feel super like sad inside, you know? But yeah, I think this was a really successful read-in month. I'm really excited to see what August is going to bring, what kinds of books. Maybe I'll get some 5 stars. Maybe I'll get some DNFs. I really hope not. But yeah, let me know. What kind of books do you want to see me read this new read-in month? Comment them down below, and if you haven't already, go ahead and subscribe for that video at the beginning of September, because that will be the read-in month, the read-in wrap-up for August, which will be cool as well. So yeah, with that, I'm going to wish you warm wishes and fish kisses, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!